Okay, we are here for episode number 2, Music Milestones YYZ, Ivar Hamilton and Scott Turner, and welcome to our podcast. Our podcast, by the way, this is episode 2. We're going to go back first by looking 40 years ago. Just before we do that, by the way, Music Milestones YYZ. For those, if you're just the first podcast you're listening to, the YYZ is the airport address for Toronto, so it's a kind of a Toronto-centric podcast.
Mm-hmm.
However, we're going to be talking about concerts that happened in Buffalo, in Hamilton, and Kitchener, etc., even London,
Detroit.
and Detroit. Yes, so
why not?
Why not? Exactly. If it's important, and Ivar was there because he was at a lot of shows.
we'll go overseas. It doesn't matter, but I think we experienced so many concerts here in the city. So we're going to talk about the ones that we went to, ones that we wished we went to, the ones we couldn't get into, the ones that other people went to, and share lots of stories.
Yes, and we'll be looking at releases, albums, and singles released in particular years. And we're actually going to start with 40 years ago this week. There's a lot to cover, so we're going to jump right in.
Let's go.
So 40 years ago, believe it or not, was 1985. That's why Ivar and I are here every week to remind everybody how old you are, and we are too. We share your pain.
How old are you, Scott? How old are you? Let's go.
Actually,
full disclosure.
We're both 65.
I'm 66, actually. 66.
Oh, you see, I was going to ask you when your birthday was. It was just recently, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in August, end of August.
Okay, so you're just ahead of me, maybe 6 months, because I'm April, so we're so close.
Yes, yeah. So it's music for seniors here.
But together we're so old. So there, we get it. We're going to talk about the week November 24th to 30th. November 24th to 30th, 1985. So
and for me, this is November. November 24th to 30th in my life has always been something that's been. I've had lots of things happen in my life in that particular week. So anyway, we'll get into it. So
no, why don't you talk about that right now? Actually, it's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it was that week back in 1988 that I left CFNY and I started at Polygram Records that week. I went to Montreal. I was up there for a week, and I thought, what did I get myself into? But leaving CFNY was such a big thing in my life. I thought originally I never wanted to leave CFNY. I was so happy, but then along came the, as we call it now, but the mistake of '88, and I had to move. I had to do something else in my life. But I'm so glad that I did. I had a wonderful experience, and so I spent. Between Polygram and then moving on to Universal when Universal bought Polygram in 1998, I had a tenure at Universal Music for 35 years, which ended the same week, November 24th to 30th. I think my last day was the 23rd of November 2 years ago before I left, and I have retired since then, and so that's why it's such a meaningful time frame for me in life.
When we talk about your birthdays, and it's like we almost retired at the same time, except I retired about 6 months before you, right?
Yes,
I think. So we're tied together this way, love it or hate it. The other thing I was going to say is what's interesting. You need a T-shirt about this week because that's a big week in your life. The other thing I was going to mention is that when you talk about the mistake of '88, if you don't understand that reference, we do talk about it in the upcoming CFNY documentary when that makes the light of day, and it will. Just hang in there. But it's basically a time the station experimented with playing top 40 music with the alternative music, and it was a big disaster.
One of the worst. Well, I guess, what do you look at some of the biggest mistakes of all time? Target coming to Canada and how big a mistake that was and how much of a disaster that was. That's about the equivalent of that. I will absolutely attest to that. So,
how did Target pop in your head like that? That was weird.
Well, I just remember, seeing some news item and reading some things going that Target coming to Canada is a textbook reason for one of the prime examples of how not to set up a business in Canada, because people never got what they wanted. Like they thought, oh, Target's coming, it's going to be fantastic. And it was basically like Zeller's Light. It was, oh, they put a Target on it, Target sign on it. And then it was none of the things that they got in America. And people just were going, this is bullshit. And they left. But Target to this day eats a shit sandwich whenever Canada comes up.
Or everybody called it Target. Remember that?
Yes, it was Target.
Target.
Yes.
I'm going to Target. Okay. So now we talk about this week, November 24th to 30th. I don't know exactly. I don't have an exact day or week, but it was the month of November 1985 that RPM opened in Toronto. Iconic club and just such a great venue. We hadn't really seen much like it, and the club scene, from the 70s going into the 80s, Toronto really came alive in the 80s, the mid 80s to late 80s, and then exploded club-wise in the 90s. And RPM was one of the early ones, and it actually started with a couple of guys, the Assoon brothers, who ran Twilight Zone. That was one of the first after-hour cool clubs in Toronto. They opened, they were the first group to find that space, RPM, before it was RPM, this warehouse at 132 Queens Quay West or East?
East. I think
East,
it was
I guess, yeah.
It was East, yeah, because it would be
anything east of Yonge
Street. Yeah.
Right. So they had Twilight Zone, and they saw this space, and they opened up what they called Fresh, and it lasted about a year before RPM came along. But that entire space, if you look at, from RPM, that later there was the warehouse, it was an entire block. It was just huge space. So when it first started as Fresh, they only used a portion of it. And then when it became RPM, they opened it up even bigger and did an amazing job. So there's a couple of guys, I believe, that were involved with the Copa, were part of it. And then another partner came in, Murray Ball, who was kind of the creative force behind it. And he was really instrumental in making that space so cool. They did these installations, stuff hanging from the ceiling.
There was the Lincoln Continental that was basically a take on the Kennedy assassination, was hanging from the ceiling. The lights were going off and on. There was an airplane hanging from the ceiling, and I don't remember the significance of that, but those two things in itself and the decorations that were around that club made it a real eye-opener, and it was a real eye-opener for people from around the world. So as a consequence, over the years, as RPM was around, they attracted a lot of special events, and a lot of big shows went in there that were, small club, big show, big acts that go in there. It was a pretty cool place at the time to hang out in, and spent many a night there. I don't know about you, Scott, but I think in the history between RPM, Government, and the warehouse, I probably was at like easily 100 shows there, if not more.
Yeah. And a great spot, because you could just make all kinds of noise there, and there was lots of parking because it was just out of the way. Of course, now it's all condos.
All those condos weren't there at the time. So yes, you could get away with a lot more down there.
Yeah, you could just get away with nonsense down there, and it was just great for that for so many years. So, it was a time, and, we're glad it happened. And there's so many shows over the years. I wanted to mention too that, it was really a club dance space as well as a concert venue. It really started from the club side of things. Terry Kelly was one of the first resident DJs. And then Earl Jive in Beverly Hills, I believe it was Sundays they were doing, and they had a certain DJ, Chris Sheppard, that was their DJ, and sort of brought him under their wing. And they were really instrumental in helping Chris's career. And I think that's important to note. And of course, Chris...
too, when you mentioned the club things, that the other parts of the club would open up for. I remember being there numerous times, and I'd be there to see an act, but going on the same night would be another part of the club, even before like the warehouse opened, that they were having a big dance event at the same time, which isn't necessarily listed on Setlist FM, which is unfortunate, because that's
right.
Full disclosure, that's where we get a lot of our our info from. But, and correct me if I'm wrong, did not some of the world's biggest DJs also play in there, like an Arman Van Heldon or some of the Pete Tong or whatever? I could be wrong on that, but I know that they had some absolute killer DJs in there over the years.
Yes, and the warehouse space before it was called the warehouse was used a couple of times, even I think for a couple of raves, yeah, and DJs and that. So, and then it was officially opened, and they had to do a lot of soundproofing in the warehouse. Quite a bit of work in there. Charles Caboth and his team did an amazing job, for those years after. So that that you think of that whole space and how much over the years that it's brought music club wise is it's just amazing. Anyway, I've got a list of I was trying to think of some shows and bands I saw there over the years.
Who did you see?
Ramones comes to mind.
Did you go see the Ramones? I mean, Ramones played there 10 times, so they were almost a second home
10?
for them. I mean, well, yeah, Ramones actually played. Gary Top told me this. The Ramones played in Toronto. It was the second most, like out of everywhere that they played in the world, Toronto was number 2 outside of New York. I think it was something like 37, 38 times that Ramones played in Toronto throughout their career. And that doesn't count those, regional shows where they would play in Oakville or Hamilton and Key to Bala and places like that. So, probably upwards of 50 times the Ramones played in this area. And they were friends with everybody. They were friends with all the local bands, good friends with Teenage Head, good friends with the Vile Tones. And of course, everybody knew everybody back then.
I was thinking one day, I was going, no wonder they're dead, because they played so many shows. Those guys did so many shows. And you're right, they play the smallest clubs anywhere. Anybody that asked.
Yes. So who else did you see there, Scott?
Tell me, who was a good show there? Kid Creole and the Coconuts.
Right.
Absolutely fantastic show. Well, anybody that's seen them live, it's such a great live show. And that was one for me that stood out. Also, Iggy Pop, Delight there. The Shaman and Utah Saints were pretty cool. I remember that. Yeah. I also made a note of Psychedelic Mondays, although I think I went once just to check it out. It wasn't really my thing, but that was a big night. Mondays, yeah. I believe it was, right? Yeah, Mondays.
Yeah, I remember that. I actually DJ there a couple of times myself, and it was pretty spectacular vibe to the room. We played some off-kilter videos, and then the station got visited by the censor board, which was kind of oops. We never, we resolved it. It was fine, but it was just, obviously somebody was there and was paying attention. But I think of some of the shows that I went to there over the years, Hunters and Collectors. I mean, they were one of my favorite Australian bands. They really kicked ass, and CFNY were big supporters of them. Peter Murphy, Iggy, same as you. I saw Iggy there. Iggy was a guy that I would try and go and see every time he came to town, and I think I saw pretty much all his shows there. And if I get into just going into the warehouse, I would go to see Motorhead every time they came to town as well. So numerous times for them. The Mission, which were pretty interesting. Doctor and the Medics, they were so. But I do remember Wire playing in there a couple of times. Julian Copp being a regular in there. 9 Inch Nails played there. They were between record contracts. They were on TVT Records when at the very start of their career, and then they moved. Then they were looking for a deal. I remember speaking to their manager. Goes, "Hey, we're looking for a record deal." And of course, they move on to be one of the biggest industrial bands in the world and signing to Interscope. But it was really interesting. They were just sort of just starting out back then. I remember the Jazz Butcher being there. Also remember, it was used by the beer companies for one of the, when they had a giant band in a small club. And so the speculation was at this time that it was going to be Pearl Jam was going to play. So there was winners from all across the country and all. I don't even think half the people from the beer company knew who was going to play. It turned out it was the Sex Pistols. Well, that wasn't exactly what a lot of people wanted to see. And John Lydon was being John Lydon, as he always was. And he thanked the competing, the competition beer company that night. I think it was, he thanked Molson for a Labatt show. And so a lot of the Pearl Jam fans weren't happy about seeing the Pistols. I thought it was great. It was spectacular. I also really wanted to see Coldplay when they were just starting to take off. And I was working for Universal at the time, and Coldplay, of course, were on EMI. and the Garys were working on the show, or Gary Cormier was helping to promote that show, and he was always good to me when I was at CFNY. And he said, Gary, I'd love to come see the show. He goes, listen, Ivar, it's no comps on this. He goes, I can't even get you a ticket to purchase. He goes, well, I'll tell you what I can do. I can hire you as an employee and you can work there. And I'm like, really? So I took tickets for an hour thinking, oh, nobody's going to see me. It's the start of the night. Well, of course, there was about 50 people from the business. I was like, what happened to Hamilton? Did he get fired or something? Why is he taking tickets at the door? Anyway, I took the tickets just before the band went on. He goes, just go in there and enjoy the show. So
best side hustle ever.
CFNY did some, yeah, no, it was fun. CFNY did some recordings in there. I know we recorded the Chameleons, and that ended up being put out as a live album there. And so some wonderful times. The Cardigans, I remember them playing in there and having a fantastic show. I remember seeing Judas Priest in there with when they had another lead singer other than Rob Halford, but this guy had come out of a Judas Priest cover band, and quite honestly, this every once in a while you get a singer that comes along and is like, damn, this guy's just as good as Rob Halford was. And they were selling Judas fucking Priest t-shirts, which I did not end up getting, but anyway. So some really great times at that venue in various iterations over the years. I mean, because it was there between the three clubs. It was there for easily 20 years, I guess, and before it finally went away because of development and what have you.
Yeah, I think it was RPM roughly from 85 to mid 90s somewhere. You know what I just remembered is that the Sundays, I think it was all ages Sundays, with eventually Shep, but Earl Jive, Beverly Hills with Shep as DJ. Remember they had the buffet? And I remember at the time the way the liquor laws were, and I don't know what, I mean, there was all ages. So, but you could serve drinks to, if you had ID or a certain area. They had a certain area that was for drinkers, but they had to have a buffet in order to serve alcohol or something.
Yeah, it was. I remember when the law came in, and it was. I mean, some places it was really suspect. I mean, and it was also early closing. I think you couldn't stay open past 11 o'clock. But I remember going off topic a little bit, but Larry's Hideaway, and it was like, it was just such a joke. It was like, if you want to have a beer, you got to have a plate full of chips or whatever. So you get a little plate, and they dump some potato chips on there, and it was like, there you go. You can, you got to eat in order to get a beer.
Yeah, and the whole buffet thing was just set up entirely just so they could serve drinks.
I heard it was Earl's.
I guess because it was Sunday.
Yeah, and I heard it was Earl's idea. It was Earl Jive's idea. He goes, listen, bring this in and we can make this a success or whatever. So,
brilliant.
Give Earl credit for that.
Absolutely. Okay, so guess what? We're talking about 40 years ago now. We can get specific in this week of the 24th to 30th, 1985, was the week that Copps Coliseum opened in Hamilton. And I had to look this up, but I didn't know where the name came from. But it was a mayor, a longtime mayor, Victor Copps.
Copps was it Sheila Copps? Sheila Copps was his daughter, I believe.
Good question. Maybe you're right.
I think it was.
Yeah. So if you're ever in a trivia, contest, there you go. There you have it. So, and did you know? Any idea who the first musical act? Obviously, Copps is really a hockey arena, and there was lots of sports activities there, but they did have bands over the years, and obviously
they had a lot. They had quite a few, although there was some dry spots, I think, as time went on. But no, I didn't look up who the first person was.
Well, I did.
Very good.
So it opened obviously November 85, but the first actual concert they had there was January 1st. Who does shows on January 1st? Anyway, they did.
Big Canadian bands generally.
It was Thompson Twins with OMD opening.
Oh,
January
fantastic.
1st, 1986. Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to know shows you saw and or other events at Copps over the years. Any favorite memories?
Well, I think the first thing that came to mind, I had to really sort of sit down and think there. I mean, and looking back on it, I was there a lot more than I thought had been there.
Yes, you.
You know, you have those. You look back in years in your life, and certain times you go, I remember everything, and other times you're going, I have no idea.
But that's me.
Now, you know, this was built as a hockey rink, and originally, you know, people thought, well, there's going to be, you know, we want an NHL franchise here, and of course that never happened. They get the Hamilton Bulldogs and the Steel, you know, whatever the
Steel Wool,
whatever Steel Hawks, or I can't remember what the name was. But my most vivid memory in the early days was the Canada Cup was there. All the big games for the Canada Cup. It was that Canada Cup in 1987. So that was a big deal prior to them having the World Cup of Hockey, and of course it was prior to the Olympics. And so that was looked at in hockey history folklore as Team Canada's probably greatest achievement outside of the 1972 series. And it was the only time you had the two best players in the entire game playing together on a line. And that was Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux were playing together on a forward line with Dale Hawerchuk. And so the final for that Canada Cup in 87 took place on September 15th. And it was Mary Lemieux scored the goal to win the game for Canada and win the cup. It was 6-5. And Canada was down 3-0 in that game and then came back to win it. And you kind of look up in, you know, hockey folklore, hockey history, looked at as one of the greatest games of hockey ever. I remember that I just went with some buddies of mine. We paid face value for the tickets. I don't think they were any more than about $35 or $40 at the time, but we got to see some of the greatest hockey of all time, and that is one of my huge memories of Copps Coliseum. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I just have a couple. And again, you nailed it with memory because I've been there a number of times, different acts and shows and stuff. But a couple that come to mind, and you love this one, is the Tragically Hip. This is the first time I had ever seen them, and it could have been the first time, I believe, because I looked it up, February 1995 was the first time the Hip played there. Anyway, I saw the Hip. I'd never seen the band before. I wasn't a huge fan of the Hip, and then seeing them live was like, wow, these guys are great live, and seeing them in Copps, because I think, you know, as hockey arenas go, you know, they're all large, but it's not as big as some other, you know, hockey arenas. And I think it was about 16,000. It was a little bit smaller than most of the other rinks that were starting to emerge at the time. Yeah. So, you know, dare I say it, an intimate, you know, or had some intimacy as hockey arenas go. It just felt a little bit smaller. Anyway, it was great seeing the Hip there. And the other one, Lumineers. I saw the Lumineers, and I believe this was their first show in Ontario. This was April 2013. They did do a couple of shows at the Sound Academy after that, their first time here. But, you know, since then, I know I'd obviously heard of the Lumineers. They had maybe only one record out at the time, but loved the Lumineers, and they're just awesome live. And now I've seen just about every Lumineers show anytime they come to town. I love the Lumineers. And I'm not a big Juno. I'm not a big awards show guy. So, but I did go, I guess I got a ticket to the Junos. I think it's probably the only time I've ever been to the Juno Awards. It was at Copps Coliseum. And so that was kind of a thrill just to see the whole production and be at a Junos presentation.
They were there. Junos were there numerous times. So that was a good go-to location. I mean, and the thing is, because you don't have a franchise hockey team or any other professional sport team in there, it's a great place if you want to do something like an awards show where you need, like, you know, a week to get things set up, sound check, camera angles, all of those types of things. And so anyway, that's just you know, why they had them there. They was pretty convenient, and Hamilton was a great host, and Junos get, you know, they reach out for sponsorship money to the various locations around the country, and Hamilton's always been great for that. So
Speaking of sponsorship, go ahead. I was just going to say it's now TD Coliseum.
Yes, which is the same group of people. Tim Lewicki, who he was the president of MLSE, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, in like 2014, around that era, 2013, 2014, and he was such a great person for that organization back then. He was the one who made sure that BMO Field got built and made sure that it was configured to World Cup standards, international soccer standards. He was an amazing visionary. So his company is the one who is now behind the revival of Copps Coliseum, now at TD Coliseum, and first show being there, of course, was Paul McCartney. So anyway, they've done an amazing job in fixing that up, and it'll just be more talent coming to this area, and there's such an overflow where they can't necessarily play there and or play Toronto because of whatever venue, not so much restrictions, but just because of so much traffic with professional sports and other things that go on. So anyway, so I saw one of the shows that I always remember there seeing before Chinese Democracy, when they were still not going on at midnight, was Guns N' Roses. And when Guns N' Roses were pretty much at their peak as far as like just rock and roll, and this would have been March 11th, 1993. I remember going down to that show with a bunch of my buddies, a bunch of people from the industry, and it was nothing to do with my job at Universal at the time. This was prior to the Universal merger. And so I go to the show, and we had too much of a good time. There was too many tequila shooters, too much beer. It's the only time in my career, Scott, that I had to get a cab from Hamilton back to Toronto and then a cab back to Hamilton the following day because we were we had too many pops,
Well, you were responsible too. Good for you.
I think it was my first $300-400 weekend just on cabs, but I had to get home somehow. I had to do it, so do you
remember what was the cab fare for that? Wow.
No, it was at least $150 to get home, and that would have been in 1993 or whatever, right? So
yep.
Anyway, and then when I got into as a time as a record company, I saw U2 there, and they were fantastic. And McCartney, the last time there, I think it was 2016. He was absolutely, you can't go wrong at any time you go see a McCartney show. Same with U2.
I forgot I saw U2 there too. Yes, keep going.
U2 might not have made great records for a number of years, but man, oh man, their live show, everybody always wants to go. And then
on U2, Ivar, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they might have played there a couple of times, but one of the times I believe they had booked out. There's an Irish pub in Hamilton that they took over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I do recall that too.
I forget the name of it, but that would have been cool.
Yeah, that I think, and that was actually where Polygram had a post-Juno party at one year too, and I think our party got rated the best that year too. So people coming to drink at our expense. So Kiss. So I worked with Kiss for many, many years, and Hamilton being a blue-collar town that it is, 3 occasions that Kiss played there, and over various years, including the when it was supposed to be their first farewell tour or whatever, and so went to that. One of my buddies at the end of the night, Paul Stanley always smashes up a guitar and throws it into the audience. So a buddy of mine who was a newscaster at a radio station in Barrie, he caught it. He still has it. It's framed. It is looked at as one of the greatest moments in his career. Now, the other thing that was kind of fun for me, I spent, as I mentioned, a ton of time working with Kiss. We did tons of shows all over Canada, and I got to know the band quite well. So the things that they did, if you remember the movie Detroit Rock City, So the movie Detroit Rock City is all about, kids trying to get their tickets and go to a Kiss concert at their hometown in Cobo Hall or whatever it was. So they decided to film it in Hamilton. All of the live concert scenes were shot in Hamilton.
Oh, that's cool.
At Copps Coliseum. And there was an outreach that and this was I think it was 1998. So there was an outreach for extras for the live scenes, which ended up being lip sync, but whatever. It was still lots of fun. So they wanted extras, but it was, you had to look like you were a Kiss fan in the 1970s. Cool. And under normal circumstances, if this was downtown Toronto, that would have been a bit of a challenge. And I remember getting the call for that because they need 3,000 fans to look like, show up and dress like you're a rock fan in the 1970s. And I'm not knocking Hamilton. I really aren't, because I love Hamilton. That's my last name. But I said, in Hamilton, that's not going to be a problem. So
anyway. I had heard there, the film studios would come up to Toronto sometimes and they want to make it like an American city. And they're like, no. And then they say, let's have a look at Hamilton. And they go, okay, this is a little dirtier, a little rougher looking. We'll film here.
We worked with Q107, and we worked with, I think maybe Hits FM, maybe whatever, was it Y95 in Hamilton at the time, and did all this outreach to get people to come to be extras in the Kiss movie. And so I got down there, and I meet somebody who's in charge of wardrobe, and there are like aisles and aisles and aisles of all of these costumes for people to wear to look like they're in the 1970s. And it goes, you were right, we didn't need any of these. So,
that's a great story.
Yeah. Anyway,
oh my God,
it's by Copps. Now the other one, and this is a personal one for me, is for a short period there, I was a runner, and I was running 2015, 2016. In 2016, I had my journey to do my very first marathon. And so there's a race that's one of the longest standing races in Canada, called Around the Bay. It's a 30K race that is out of Hamilton. It starts at Copps Coliseum. It started in front of Copps Coliseum, and it finished at Copps Coliseum. So in 2016, it takes place in April. I did the Around the Bay run, and it was really difficult. I had done a couple of half marathons. I had still not done a full marathon, and this thing's halfway between. It's 30K. And so you get to what they did was, when you get towards the end, there's a bunch of hills, and it became very difficult.
That it's a little hilly. Yeah,
it was hilly. It was windy. People were joking about, well, you're going to stop at Easterbrooks and get yourself a hot dog during the race. And I'm like, I don't think so. Anyway, the best part about that was they opened up Copps Coliseum so you could do a lap around the floor, I guess. Wherever the hockey ice was, they set it up so it was a proper track. So you finished in Copps Coliseum. So it was such a high to me to finish that race and do the finish line in Copps Coliseum. And I distinctly remember I was listening to new song by the Cockney Rejects as I crossed that finish line. So damn that. So
that's so cool. You know what? That's amazing that you did that. And also shout out to Pamela Blair. You remember Pamela Blair? Worked with us at CFNY. She's a huge runner, and it's still running today. And she's done that a number of times and talked about it. And it's a tough one. It's a tough one. Copps Coliseum. So that was 40 years ago. November 30th, 1985 is when that opened. We're just going to roll through because we're in the 80s here. I thought we'll just roll through some other songs and albums that were released 40 years ago. Lucy Show, the album Undone, which had that song Ephemeral. This is no heaven. That's my little version of it.
Scott sings it because of copyright versions.
Yes,
that, right?
Just a heads up warning is some of these songs on the show will be sung by Ivar and Scott to help save our asses being sued.
There was a CFNY feature back in the day called The Guy Who Sings Real Crappy. And I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
one of the guys is like, well, he's going to sing the song. And God, it was awful. But anyway.
Wow. 40 years ago, Downtown Train, Tom Waits, great track, was released.
I got to say that Tom Waits in the early days of CFNY was certainly one of the artists that we really, really grasped. Yeah. And two of the announcers who unfortunately are no longer with us, JR, Jim Reed, and James Scott, were both huge fans. And in particular, even on top of that, who's also unfortunately not with us, is Brad McNally. Brad McNally was probably the biggest champion of Tom Waits. And some great memories. And that song, Downtown Train, to me is one of his definitive tracks.
Okay, also 40 years ago, Echoes in a Shallow Bay, EP from Cocteau Twins. They did like to put EPs out back in the day.
Yes. Well, I do remember, it's funny about Cocteau Twins. Cocteau Twins were outside the box for a lot of people who worked at CFNY way back when. And it took some convincing to get them on the air. I will say that CFNY was not the first place to hear Cocteau Twins on the radio, though you wouldn't hear them on Chum FM or Q107, most certainly. But where I used to hear Cocteau Twins was on the CBC. And I'd be driving home from a road show late at night, and I would hear Brent Banbury on CBC's Brave New Waves. And I also remember Liz Janik was a fan, and surprisingly, Beverly Hills was also a fan too. And so that one, I think, we were getting played as an import for a little while. But Polygram was also, they were the distributors. Cocteau Twins were on 4AD Records. And so they were the distributors of that. And they were always very good about making sure that that stuff came out pretty quickly. And so I think in 1985, that's when really our journey with the Cocteau Twins began, because they had some records out before that, but we played them after that, and they ended up coming to town until 1990. But anyway,
I remember that too, Ivar, because I had started 84 at the station, and I don't think it was till 85 that a Cocteau Twins record was in the library, and I know that. CKLN was another one that played them, and I had heard, and some of the clubs. I remember Pearly Dewdrops Drops, which is a fantastic track, and IKEA Guinea. But I think then they got placed into the library, a little bit, after the fact. But hey, as long as they got played,
once they got in there, it was pretty good. I mean, they went on to be pretty big band, and I think the thing with Cocteau Twins is that they stood the test of time pretty well. You put on a Cocteau Twins record today, it doesn't sound dated, much unlike a lot of other things from way back when. I will tell you a sort of little side story about the Cocteaus is in 88, just before I left the radio station, I went on a junket with the Polygram set up for Big Country, and they were playing in Moscow. They had an album called Peace in Our Time, and I'm staying in this hotel, which was one of the biggest hotels in the world. It was ridiculous.
This is in Moscow?
In Moscow, Russia, when it was still communist. So it was not, there was not much perestroika going on at that time. Things hadn't really opened up, and I was chosen to go. And at that time I was, planning to leave the radio station. So who cares? And 3 months later, I'm working for Polygram. But regardless, they put a whole bunch of people on the plane from Canada, and there was people, and they flew everybody to the UK, and then got on a separate plane and flew to Moscow. But I remember sitting in the little lounge, because they didn't have TVs in the hotel rooms. I mean, you get to Moscow in 1988, and I was going, wow, this is what it must have been like in the 1930s. It was so far behind back then, which of course it all changed now. But I was sitting there watching television in this little lounge, and on comes a military exercise with fighter jets in slow motion. And these fighter jets were, the music was set to the Cocteau Twins. And so it was so amazing for me to see that. And one of the last interviews I did before I left CFNY, I believe it was with Simon Raymond from the Cocteau Twins. And I said, hey, I just want to let you know I was in Moscow, and they were playing you on national television there in a military exercise video. And he flipped out. He goes, I had no idea that had happened at the time.
Could never imagine that in a million years. That's amazing. That's amazing. Also, 40 years ago this week, Faith No More, We Care a Lot, big record, big sound, big production. Like that one. That was that
The
played loud.
sort of the metal funk, one of the early ones that we ended up playing, and it kind of preceded what the Chili Peppers did later too.
Yeah. Oingo Boingo released, it actually released first as an A side, Just Another Day, and then Dead Man's Party was on the B side, and Dead Man's Party became a more popular song and got its own release. Not a huge Oingo Boingo fan, but Dead Man's Party was a massive track.
I mean, it became really big because of, I think it was a frat house record.
Sure.
And it had presence in a couple of movies as well. It escapes me off the top of my head, but I think it was, one of those good time, fun 80s movies, a John Hughes thing or whatever. But it was interesting. It was a woman who I know who was in the business way back when, and she went out, she goes to a ton of concerts, and the one that was out in California, and the name also eludes me, but it's the big alternative festival that's every year. It's kind of like the alternative Coachella, where everybody who's anybody's out there. And she came back here this year and goes, I can't believe it. Everybody's telling me how big Oingo Boingo are in California. And they might be big in California, but they certainly weren't big out here. And I was like, you were not wrong. And I remember them, they were on the Police Picnic first year too. And it was like, yeah, they were okay. It was all right, but it certainly wasn't a highlight. It wasn't like seeing Killing Joke or Iggy Pop that day.
Yeah, for sure. Scott Merritt, Transistor was released 40 years ago. It was actually re-released because he had it on his album out in 83, Serious Interference. Cool track that I remember playing on CFNY quite a lot.
I would give Liz Janik full credit for that one. I think she was the one who discovered, and I think Don Burns was a good was a fan as well.
Desire, Gene Loves Jezebel, 40 years ago. The Dance Mix, I remember that in the clubs.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly they had their moment. I think it was kind of like 85 to 88, and they went out on tour. Three bands. I think it was New Order, Echo and the Bunnymen, Gene Loves Jezebel, all out on tour together, and they ended up playing the CE here in Toronto.
Also this week, 40 years back, we're talking the week of November 24th to 30th, Love and Rockets, first Toronto show for Love and Rockets. Of course, these are guys that came out of Bauhaus. And the album Seventh Dream of Teenage Heaven had just come out, and it was a huge CFNY record and a huge Toronto just loved this album, and for good reason. It's a great record.
I mean, they love Love and Rockets. They love Tones on Tail, which Go was such a gigantic track, which was two of the members of Bauhaus and Love and Rockets. So which is interesting because it wasn't until 1990 that So Alive came about, and they ended up having a #1 hit with that.
Yeah, that was a surprise. Anyway, they played the Copa, and I have a ticket for the show, but honestly, I can't remember. Talk about shows you can remember some things, shows you can't remember a thing. Weird place for Love and Rockets, though. The Copa.
The Copa was an odd setup. I enjoyed. There was it was a good party place. It was good to go and eat the buffet or whatever that was there.
But the weirdest sight lines. Yeah.
The sight lines were just off.
Yeah. It was a funny place. Okay, so we're still in the 80s here. So we're just going to zip back a little bit to 1980. So we're still in the 80s, 45 years ago. But there's a couple of tracks that came out on this week in 1980 we wanted to mention. Ant Music, Adam and the Ants. Such a big track. I always love that line. So unplug the jukebox, do us all a favor. That music's lost its taste, so try another flavor.
Well, I'm DJing, I'm doing a DJ gig, as you know, Scott, and that I have that record with me because I knew we were going to talk about it. I was like, you know what? Let's reintroduce that record again, see what people think of it.
Yeah, it was a great moment in time, and just a little bit different than anything else out there at the time. It was great.
Those
Dirty Mind by Prince. Yes. Dirty Mind by Prince. So you mentioned this for a reason. I can't remember why.
This wasn't his big record. He was still obscure, but it's a little known fact that for the first Police Picnic, that one of the acts that Gary Topp wanted to book was Prince. He had spent a lot of time in New York, and Prince was hanging around the clubs there doing his thing. And he's like, oh, I have to have him on the show. But he had a lot of other people there that were financial people that were working on the Police Picnic, and And they were like, absolutely not. We don't know who this is, and there's no
Right.
chance this is going to happen. So he kind of got outvoted on that. But can you just imagine if Prince was there and people look back on it like, wow,
Yep.
probably would have done well.
Yeah, or one of those cases where there's people just don't know what to make of it,
Or they don't get it, and then the act gets
they
booed.
don't get it at the time.
They
Yeah.
don't know what they're in for. You know, like I think we've talked about this on the Jesus and Mary chain too. So
Yeah. The Clash, the Call Up.
So that was the first single off of Sandinista. And, for CFNY in Toronto, that was something that actually got played. That song got played a little bit later on, not so much when that record first came out. But to me, I just remember it kind of really resonated with some of the background vocals in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, we are the Marine Corps, and so it's a bit of an eye opener, and it's almost Sandinista's like a masterclass in the Clash. There's so many things going on with that record and influences from all over the world, and that's just one of them.
Okay, I'm gonna play a little clip of a song here.
Does that sound French Canadian or what?
It reminds me of that SNL skit that with Dieter and
Dieter's dance party.
yeah, and it's time to dance. Men Without Hats. So this is really cool because their very first EP. We don't have the exact date. It's really, really difficult to nail down the exact date, but we figure it was around November 1980 because they had recorded this in the summer. And so they got this EP together, Men Without Hats from Montreal. They had this EP out, and I think was a 10-inch.
It's a 10-inch. Yeah, I still have I have a mid copy of it because I never played it much. So it was 10-inch 45, or actually, sorry, it wasn't a 45. It was a 10-inch 33. It was produced by their manager Mark Durand, and it was our
limited pressing too.
It was very limited, and but that was CFNY's introduction to Men Without Hats, and of course they went on to a lot of bigger things in later years.
Yep, and that's where I heard them for the first time, and I love the sound. I've always liked Men Without Hats, and thank you CFNY for that. I think is that a collector's item because there were only so many copies of that around.
Totally collector's item. You will not see that out there. Well, I shouldn't say you won't see it out there because there are a lot of Canadian records that are in used record bins these days. I would say that one's probably not one of them, but you can find them. I mean, when I went to Italy recently, I found a bunch of Canadian records that I haven't seen here for years and years. So who knows?
Yeah, look for it. Folk of the '80s EP, the original one from 1980. The Jam sound effects came out 40 years ago this month, which ended up being. Sorry.
Go ahead. I would say that it's Weller's favorite Jam album.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's interesting. The other thing too, I noted here, it ended up as 22 on the top 81 of 1981. I guess because at the end of the year, or the album may not have gotten an official Canadian release until January or something. And that I know
it may have been the case, but I think there was also, it was just. The timelines back then were just a little bit different, and things were a little bit looser, and things showed up on, the following year for whatever reason, and maybe it just didn't have the impact at the start. But you sit there and look at all of the Jam records out there, and I think, besides A Town Called Malice, which was the one that was their biggest hit on CFNY, the second most played one, it's pretty damn close, is That's Entertainment, and that's on Sound Effects. And they put out a deluxe version of it a few years back or whatever, I think on the 30th anniversary of that one. So, but as I said, it's, and Weller too, Every time you go see Paul Weller, and I've seen him just about every time he's ever come to Toronto, except I think I missed him once. There's always jam tracks in his set, usually 4 or 5, and That's Entertainment is still in his set today.
That's Entertainment aside. My ears still ringing from seeing the Jam at the concert hall. I don't know what year it was, but that was a loud show.
Much better than the one at the TD Coliseum. Pretty Green was another. It was a big song on that album too that I really, really enjoyed that one too. I mean, most of it. I love all the Jam stuff. I'm a sucker for anything Weller, anything Jam.
Fair enough.
And Style Council too. It pisses me off that the Style Council never came to Toronto.
Bit of an unknown, The Sound, album called Jeopardy.
Yeah, I mean the Sound are bigger today than they ever were. For people that follow post-punk bands today and look back on the history of it, their singer and chief songwriter Adrian Borland is no longer with us, but the second Sound album, From the Lion's Mouth, is looked at today as one of the all-time post-punk records, and as I said, the band really are bigger now today than they ever were. And listen, there's a number of bands that are like that. You can look at the prime example of the Velvet Underground, who never sold any records way back when, or Nick Drake never sold any records way back when, and they've gone on to be sort of iconic. And the Sound are becoming one of those bands. I must admit, I played a couple of tracks way back when. I never paid much more attention to them. Now I do. When I'm looking for things to play on my radio shows, I'm like, if somehow a Sound record comes up or somebody mentions that, I do go back and listen. And to me, it sounds better now than it did back then.
Yeah, I agree. I actually went back and listened to it, and I'm like, this is a good record. And for whatever reason, maybe the marketing promotion didn't happen, or they fell between the cracks because some other bigger album was out, and that can happen. Yeah.
Well, they were on the same label of Echo and the Bunnymen at the time. So,
okay. A couple more while we're still in the 80s, just to finish the 80s, a couple of big concerts. First of all, the Police, Massey Hall, was November 24th, 1980. This sold out. This is their 4th show. So remember, they played these tiny clubs from, the Edge. And there was also, they played
Horseshoe.
The Horseshoe, yes. And then
I think, was it Maple Leaf Ballroom? Might have been the 3rd one, and then moved to Massey Hall. I could be wrong on Maple Leaf Ballroom.
Danforth Music Hall, or
maybe I think it was Danforth Music Hall. Yeah, because it was U2 that ended up the Maple Leaf Ballroom.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about this because I had in my notes that there was they had filmed this and they recorded it for something, and I couldn't find. I further looked into it. I could not find any place where that was used or the recording of that, other than there are bootlegs out there. And I found in a note somewhere that they did film and did record a lot of their shows and never used them, but for whatever reason they did. And so maybe that's where that came from. But if you're looking around, there's a bootleg of it. There's lots of them.
Yeah, I mean, they might have been early pioneers on that. I know that Copeland was a big film guy, so he was always had a video camera with him, or an 8mm or whatever back at the time.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah,
maybe that's it. There is some, for those who are super Police fans. There's some YouTube. I don't know if it's video, but there's some YouTube. There's recordings. Some of these bootlegs made it onto YouTube, and you can.
It's funny. There's a lot more bootlegs out there now. I mean, it went away for a long time, but and they weren't around in Canada for a long time, or at least not readily available. Now you go in most indie record stores, there's a lot of extra recordings when you, especially in some of the bigger bands. You go into the Rush section, you go in to see Black Sabbath, going, why do they have 60 albums out? Because there's all these like suspect albums from Europe that come in, and of course now they're better produced than they were back then, and the packaging's fantastic on a lot of these things. So for fans, it's great.
I'm going to guess that this was the last smallish. I mean, you're at Massey Hall. It's a big difference from the other venues before, but I would assume after this it was Maple Leaf Gardens. And
I mean, the police moved up very quickly, right? So the U2 and the Police and to a certain extent, Simple Minds, they all kind of moved up the ladder very quickly. It wasn't long. Those small clubs just didn't happen for very long.
And the Stranglers show, which was back, I have the date. I don't know. I didn't write it down here.
Concert hall.
Concert hall, yes. It was Lydia Lunch that opened. I did look it up. Lydia Lunch apparently opened. Sometimes when you look back and there's some resources for these things, but sometimes at the last minute, venues change. Sometimes the date even changes, or sometimes the opening act is changed at the last minute. Because you were recalling a Men Without Hats incident.
Men Without Hats, and it might have been a different date, but and of course, Scott, you say Lydia Lunch, many times that we see these Canadian bands open for these American bands because they're a last minute addition because the X band didn't make it across the border for paperwork or whatever reasons. But Men Without Hats was, unfortunately, people hated them. They just were like,
and this is opening for Stranglers, of course.
Opening for the Stranglers,
so
and
just
they got
a mismatch. Yes.
People spitting at them, and then when the Stranglers were on stage, people started spitting at them, and back then gobbing at these bands apparently was not supposed to be a negative thing. Well, it really was to the Stranglers, and I know the same thing happened with 999, but the Stranglers, Jean-Jacques Brunel went nuts, and he went into the audience and went after somebody who had spit at him, and that was the end of that. They had them probably ejected from the venue at the time, but you look back on it going, it was a horrible thing for people to do way back when. Why would you want to spit at a band? It was stupid.
Yes, and I think the other thing that happened too is that punk scene happened so fast and ended so fast in the UK, and it was delayed in North America, and then everybody was still punking and pogoing and spitting, and it's like that's over. Yeah.
The pogoing thing, carried on, like, especially with the sort of American hardcore bands, and they'd have the big circles and things like that. It was like, okay, and that was fine, but it was just like, the spitting thing was really stupid. It was just like, forget it, right? And in the UK, they used to, at the festivals, like, people would piss in bottles and throw them at the bands. I'm like, well, what does that achieve? It was just so stupid.
Agreed. Oh, I know what happened. I pressed the wrong button. See, this is episode 2, Ivar. We're just, a few bugs along the way. Here we go. There we are. That's your sloppy producer here, Scott Turner. Just hit the wrong button. It's all good. So that music is, so we're moving into a different decade now. So we're bringing you into the 1990s now.
Mm-hmm.
Just a few to talk about here, but a big one. Just talking about live shows it was November 28th, 1995. Alanis Morissette sold out at the Warehouse. Now, she had played, and this was a big moment. So this is talk about a meteoric rise when Jagged Little Pill came out, because she had done the release party, the record release party for Jagged Little Pill was June 22nd, Velvet Underground. Then she also did a show at Lee's Palace, August 1st, Lee's Palace, and now we're at the Warehouse. It's sold out. Everybody's losing their minds over this new artist and new album, Jagged Little Pill. And the rest is history, of course.
It was a meteoric rise. I recall at the time having a conversation when I was working. I just started marketing at Polygram, and having a conversation with an international person from New York at Mercury Records, and she started talking about Alanis Morissette, and we were working Joan Osborne at the time, and she's like, "Oh, do we ever have competition?" And I was just like, "Yeah, what is it?" She goes, "Alanis Morissette." And of course, it went on to be a Diamond Plus record. One of the biggest. You look
ever.
At the sort of global spectrum of things going on at that time. That is historically now one of the biggest records of all time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some are Canadian, from Shania Twain,
Yes.
and different artists entirely, of course, but just the in terms of selling records, the Canadians, whoa, on a
I mean, it
grand
was
scale, yeah.
completely different direction. She had been signed to MCA before. She had some pop records out, which,
Yep.
she's disowned over the years. This is Alanis Morissette I'm speaking of. Like, she's like, and Universal in later years, like, yeah, we should put those out. We should reissue them. And Alanis's camp always shut them down. And I think to this day, they're still, I mean, you can hear them. You can hear them out there if you want to, but it's not like you could not go out and buy them. Like, she just does not look back at those years very fondly.
Okay, next track I want to talk about. Oh, sorry, what's that?
Scott,
Is that your dog barking?
The dog is barking. That means there's a package at the door. Excuse me.
This is
so
excellent.
Scott,
Ivar Hamilton.
You can entertain the people while I get the package.
I'll fill in. This is a great moment. So that's Ella, Ivar's dog barking. It was a great audio alarm system in the Ivar Hamilton house. So Ivar, who's down in his big music den, has to go upstairs, but it's for good reason, because Ivar's likely, it's a package. And when you get a package delivered at Ivar Hamilton's house, there is a 99.999% chance it's a box set. It could be a new music book or a new album, new something that Ivar's ordered. And we're about to find out what it is. I'm going to say, now, last week you got a couple of records box set. It's been a couple of weeks now, maybe since he's had a book. Maybe it's a book. I'm going to go, it's a book. That's what I'm going to put money on it, that Ivar's going to come down back into his office here. He's approaching the microphone now. We're looking at the box. I'm looking at the box. Of course, this is just audio, I'll explain exactly what's happening. So it is a box. Ivar, I've been setting the scene here that it's either a box set or a book. And I said, I'm going to say it's a book. Ivar's got the box cutter out now. He's opening it up. So I don't think it's an Amazon package. It's probably some specialty delivery. It's
Pure.
Now it's leaning towards maybe a box set record CD collection, because the box is rather large. So I don't see it being a book, but I'm still going to keep my first guess, or my vote for the book. There's a lot of packaging here that Ivar's pulling out. And we have a CD, ladies and gentlemen.
We've got some CDs, and we've got some vinyl in here too.
Okay, so what let's hear what it is.
Okay.
And how many pieces here, Ivar?
Well, I'll just set this up a little bit, because I worked on this project.
And remember, we're on audio, so they may not be able to see this.
Okay, so they can't see this, but the ones on video. So this is Lighthouse, One Fine Morning. This is the anniversary edition, fully remastered with beautiful clarity, limited edition, psychedelic 3-color splatter.
Yes.
And to me, it's like going, you know what? Because of the artwork on that album cover, and because of the era when it originally came out, which was 1971, being able to put the splatter, which didn't exist back in the 70s, I think it really complements what Lighthouse is all about. And they've been really, really colorful on the, look at that.
I love that. Yes. Okay. Ivar will post. You have to post.
We'll do some pictures.
Pictures of that on our Facebook page, or on our socials. Music Milestones YYZ. Look for us on your socials. If you're not following us already, that actually looks pretty cool.
Yeah. So. And the connection with Lighthouse to CFNY is that Skip Prokop, post Lighthouse, ended up working at CFNY. He was on our sales team at one point, and then he was also doing
the gospel show.
He was doing a
Rock in a Hard
Place, a religious based show, sort of.
Yeah, it was kind of Christian rock, and it was called Rock in the Hard Place. And a funny quick story is that when I first started at CFNY. That show was on the air, and he was a great. When you met him in the radio station, he was prepping his show during the day sometimes, and he would come in, and you had these great conversations. He was a very, very interesting guy. A lot of great stories, and I was telling Ivar this a while back. I was I think at least 6 months or maybe a year in, and I'd see him, hey, Skip, how's it going, buddy? And he's, hey, man, how you doing, man? He always talked like that. And he was just a character, but I had no idea this guy was in Lighthouse. It took me like just randomly by accident. Somebody says, he was in Lighthouse. And I'm like, what? What?
I think
stupid me did not know. And I knew Lighthouse, and I loved their songs. And anyway, that was a funny story.
We had him, I guess we had a CFNY house band shortly, or something. There was something with the Slime Dogs, and Skip played with them, came in and played drums, and everybody thought that was great. And I think we played Sunny Days or whatever. So Skip was a wonderful guy. But anyway, I was really, really proud. It was my first big project since I retired. I did it about a year and a half ago. Did all the liner notes, worked closely with Paul Hoffert, and interviewed a whole bunch of people that were connected with Lighthouse, and learned a bunch of things about Lighthouse that I wasn't aware of before, and put them into the liner notes. So hope you can support it. And there's lots of extra songs on this nice. That weren't on the original album too. So
what else? What are the other discs?
Oh, the other one is a Coney Hatch anniversary edition of their debut album, and Andy Curran, Andy Curran actually supplies our instrumental music, so he's in the band. So they just put that out, Andy. And so there you go. But because I did the liner notes, I asked for a couple of extra copies. There's some people in America that I want to send this Lighthouse record to, and it's funny, there's certain bands from Canada that people forget. And Lighthouse is one of them. I mean, even they were very similar to the band Chicago and Chase way back when, or Blood, Sweat, and Tears. But as time goes on, people forget. And they were just a magnificent band, a magnificent live band. They were ahead of their curve way back when. They were sort of on a similar level as the Guess Who. They won all sorts of Juno awards, and they were all over top 40 radio as well as being on FM radio. But as time goes on, they're not as well remembered, but I'm glad that their legacy is being represented here.
I was going to say, if you're not familiar, or if you are familiar, haven't seen some of the footage, some of the live footage that's on YouTube, impressive live band.
Yes, absolutely. And they still do the odd gig. They're usually a couple of shows a year. Obviously, there's a lot of members who aren't around anymore, but the people that are filling the shoes do an absolutely admirable job. And Paul Hoffert, who was front and center from day one, he's still around, and he's been doing a lot of press to help move this along, so to speak.
Okay. We were talking about 30 years ago, 1995. We talked about the Warehouse show with Alanis Morissette. I want to play a couple of clips from a really, really cool track that came out 30 years ago this week. The end of the song, but you get this.
It doesn't sound like an edit at all, Scott.
As we enter into our podcast universe here, Ivar and I are still working out a few bugs. So my editing skills, I was not a producer, I was a program director. So excuse that edit. But it was such a monster cool track, and it had so many different layers to it that the song is Insomnia by Faithless, by the way. And there's I think about an 8-9 minute version on the album, which is stunning, and it has so many parts to it. Here's just another little bit from that. If you excuse me a second,
you're playing it again. You just another edit. Come on.
Yeah, it's another part of the song. Let's see how bad this edit is.
Scott, for God's sake,
terrible. There it is. Yeah, so it has this this keyboard drop in it that just builds and builds, and it just turns into this huge anthem, which was played at raves. It's just a great big track. And we did sadly lose Maxi Jazz, the lead singer of Faithless, died just a few years ago in 2022. But uber cool track, Insomnia by Faithless. A couple of other tracks came out 30 years ago. Pulp, Disco 2000. Not a big Pulp fan, but that's a cool song. I like that song.
Great record. I mean, Pulp were a big band in this part of the world. They did very well. They had gold records here, and their album that came out this year, first album in like 12 years, or first new music in 13 years, probably one of the best comeback albums of the year. Absolutely fantastic. Went and saw them play at History, and then they came back, played the Bud stage.
So speaking of concerts, a couple that were 35 years ago, I know Pixies at the Concert Hall, November 27th, 1990. I know you're a big Pixies fan. I'm sure you were at that show.
Yes, absolutely was at that show. I went to pretty much all the Pixie shows except for maybe a couple of the early ones that I missed. But I love that band, and I worked them so hard when I was a promo rep at Polygram. And during that time period when CFNY was being quite experimental with the top 40 stuff, I could not get them played on the radio station, which was an absolute crime. The Pixies had the #1 alternative record in the world, and CFNY wouldn't play them. So, but that was only for a very short period of time, and all things are good now. And they were in 1990. That was the Trompe Le Monde record that came out. We had a special promo T-shirt that we did up for UMass, so the University of Massachusetts, and I was like, you know what, let's have some fun. Let's make a coat of arms and put it on a T-shirt. So the band loved it. We had a great time, and they went on. It was maybe not even 2 years later that they were opening for U2 on their world tour as well.
And Faith No More Superstars, they played November 25th, 1990. I guess we're talking 35 years ago. Superstars, yeah, we talked about this a few times. Superstars that thankfully was short-lived, but not the best venue, certainly acoustic-wise.
Just a venue in the wrong place. It wasn't. It just was, the wrong venue at the wrong time. But short-lived. They had some people that were that had a lot of money. There was some people actually who ran a club called Stars in Brampton, and then upped it to a much bigger club, and. But because it was in an industrial part of Mississauga, it just was difficult to get to, not decorated properly, or at least for we've got many examples of places that concerts probably shouldn't have been at.
Yes, true.
That was one of them.
That was one of them. Yep. Okay, we're rolling on here. We're getting short on time, so I just thought we'd just push back. We're going back 50 years now, so 1975, Lord, what is it? Friends don't tell friends that 1975 was 50 years ago, but it was.
Yeah.
That's okay. Here's a track that was released 50 years ago this week, and let's see if you remember this particular the part of the song that you'll never forget.
Woo! The Tubes World Tour.
What do you want from life? The Tubes. I just love that part.
They were a great band way back when. I never got to see them live, unfortunately.
I
just, I saw their performance on SCTV and read about how what a great showman Fee Waybill was, but they were one of the the early days of CFNY. They were kind of one of our signature bands, and it was too bad that they the legacy for them didn't continue on for much beyond the early 80s. But yeah, what a fabulous band.
Absolutely. A couple other big ones. Night at the Opera, the album, Queen, number 128. I think about an album that's that old, it's held up, so well. Number 28, 128 on Rolling Stone magazine's 500 greatest albums of all time. Just an amazing album, if not just for that one song, which was just so cool and so different than anything else.
I was going to say, I think if they redid the poll today, it would be higher on that, because, we with the movie out there, and of course, with Wayne's World. It just, there was a lot of things that, over the years that just propelled Queen's legacy. And there's just so many young people that love Queen today too. They're certainly a generational act, but if you saw the movie, there was lots of, there's a whole, scene in the movie where, they were just, the band thought that Bohemian Rhapsody was ridiculous. The rest of the guys in the band, besides Freddie or whatever, he goes, I'm going to show you. And he goes into the BBC and is like, we're going to play the whole thing in here. And they're like, the band were, what is the song? I Love My Car or something. They wanted that to be the single. And, years on, I kind of listened to that song, go, yeah, it's not a bad song. But Bohemian Rhapsody, there's been nothing like it before. There's been nothing like it since. So
Agreed.
It deserves the legacy that it got.
For sure. Lakeside Park, Rush came out 50 years ago. And now, tell us about, first of all, I know there's going to be a monument put up there. Tell us about that, but also specifically, where is it? Because I've been down in the area so many times. I've never gone to the park.
Yeah, I mean, there is a Lakeside Park in Saint Catharines, and it's a beautiful little park. There's I guess there's a Neil Peart gazebo that's up there right now. And he obviously, if you listen to the song, he wrote about having great times there during the summer, and it's still there today. There's, ice cream stands and little shops and restaurants and things down there. A great beach. I've taken my dog down there a few times to go along the beach area. So for people that grew up in St. Catharines, it's a place where memories are made, and Neil put that into the Carouse of Steel record, and now there's a whole movement with this 50th anniversary tour that there will be a portion of the VIP tickets will all go towards this statue of Neil and his drum set or drum kit to go up in St. Catharines. The fundraisers have been going on for quite some time, but it's actually going to be a pretty monumental statue exhibit, and it costs a lot of money to do. So they're doing all the things that they possibly can to raise money, and there's been local initiatives to do that too. But I think, I'm proud of the fact that I now live in the area that's close to that. And of course, there's Laura Secord High School in St. Catharines as well, is where they filmed the show in 1974 in the very first album, and the first time that they were filmed on television.
And that's on YouTube too. It's great.
You can get that on YouTube, and you can see it in the documentary. But like literally, a block down the road is the public school that was featured in the movie Christmas Story. And the public school, the scene in the movie where the kids go out and they double dog dare the kid to put his tongue on the fence when it's frozen, and he gets his tongue caught on the fence. That is right beside Laura Secord. So it's like some local history for you for arts and entertainment.
Yes, and the tour coming, which is amazing, right? The fact that it's going to be another Rush tour.
Yes, and Paul McCartney had something to do with them getting back together. He was the one who actually egged Geddy on to get back out there. So so glad that they're doing this. And yes, they do have their the new drummer, who's absolutely fantastic. I had actually seen her play with Jeff Beck the very last time he played in Toronto before he passed. She was fantastic, and now she's got the biggest shoes in the world to fill with replacing Neil Peart. But from all accounts, the band love her, and that she's going to do just great.
Okay, that wraps it up. We're just running short on time, so we're going to wrap it up this week. Always a lot of fun. Episode number two. Next week, the episode 3, we're going to cover the week of December 1st to December 7th. So look forward to doing that. Anything else you want to add, Ivar?
We're going to start talking about some holiday stuff, because we get into December. Why not, Scott? We got to do that.
Absolutely. Yes. We didn't have time to talk about Greg Lake, I Believe in Father Christmas, but I think we'll just do a whole thing and pick our favorite Christmas tracks. Yes. Good idea. Thank you, Ivar.
Okay. We're good.
Thanks, everybody. Follow us on the socials, Music Milestones YYZ. Thanks, everybody.